Company. I'm a volunteer. This is Jim. Michael is a ranger actually, but he's new to this battlefield. So he's here to join us, keep us company, and add things as might come up.
And also report back to everybody.
That's right. He's taking pictures. Does anyone have any objection to having a picture taken? Because he's been known to put it on the internet. So, if you do, just turn or something. So, if you do have your map and you're looking at it like this, you need to turn it upside down, okay? Because if you're looking at it this way, we're standing right here in the corner, right at the church, and the Union line would have gone that way and the Confederates would have been out that way. But of course, this would be June 8th of '62, and this would be the last really 2 days of Stonewall Jackson's Valley Campaign. So if you've read about the Valley Campaign, there was a battle that takes place in Harrisonburg, a small skirmish on the 6th, and that is to try to hold up the Union Army as they're moving up to follow up on Jackson, who's retreating this way to its Port Republic. So all of those miles that the Army had marched, and by the way, they estimate that Jackson's Valley Campaign, the men marched about 650 miles. If you were to get in your car here and drive to Maine, once you get to Kittery on the border of Maine, you've driven about 650 miles. So in the course of a couple of months, that's how far his men have walked, okay? And most of it was in very foul weather, kind of like today, only worse, because it was always raining. Up until 1912, the spring rain totals in the Shenandoah Valley were the highest ever recorded in 1862, up until 1912. So if you can imagine that, it was a very, very wet spring. And it had rained, as Jackson was kind of retreating up the valley, it had rained several days before as he was retreating. So anyways, just so you know, if you look at this as being about 8 o'clock in the morning on June 8th, there's a group of soldiers in what was then a brick church here. And you may have read the signs, the new signs that have been put out. But several of the men were here, Confederates, members of actually, if you look at your map, and if you look at the bottom right, there's the 15th Alabama. And the 15th Alabama had been stationed right here. And Fremont's army would have been advancing down the Port Republic Road. My understanding is the main road into Port Republic wasn't the one that we currently use, but if you wanted to go to Port Republic, the main road, you would have had to bear right and then left and go this direction to get to Port Republic. So this would have been the main road, and therefore what they call the van, or the beginning, the front end of an army, they would have come down to the port, down here to what's then known as the Kieseltown Road, taken a right, and then they would have gone left to come down this way. So if you look at your map, up here, there's a what's called a brigade. It's a demi-brigade because there's only 2 regiments in the brigade, and it's under a man named Clouseray. And what he does is he turns the corner, starts heading in this direction. There's a little service going on in the church, and somebody fires an artillery shot, and it comes in, and people start to get worried. So everyone kind of comes out of the church, and what they find is there's an army approaching them. So the members of there's a commander of the 15th Alabama, his name is Colonel James Courtney. And Courtney says he sends 2 of his companies out in advance to kind of, they're vedettes, they're there to kind of soften the blow and see what's happening. And the rest of them form line right across the road here on the other side. And so as Clouseray moves forward, he has a regiment out in front. It's called the 8th Virginia. that's Union. So really, it's about this time that the Union regiments that are from West Virginia become known as West Virginian. So the 8th Virginia that makes contact here with the 15th Alabama is actually a West Virginia regiment. And there's an exchange with the two companies that are sent out front. Cruiser continues to move forward. The 15th Alabama here, their colonel says, this doesn't look good. He tells his men to cap their rifles and get ready to fire. As the Union troops continue to move in this direction, he says, don't bother firing, let's just get back to the Confederate lines over here. So what he does is, without engaging the main body of the 15th Alabama, he just hightails it in that direction along this road, back to the Confederate line, which is on the high ground in the distance there. In the process of evacuating this area, a lot of his men get shot in the back as they're trying to retreat. So there are several casualties to the 15th Alabama as they retreat in this direction. If you look at the map, it shows you the 15th Alabama retreating from here, and it shows their route back to the main Confederate line. So it's a little bit after 8 o'clock. The Confederates had formed on the far ridge, and as they're sitting over there, they start to hear artillery fire behind them from Port Republic. It's about 8:30 roughly in the morning, and about 9 o'clock, Dick Ewell, who's in charge of all the Confederate troops out here, decides he's going to send some of his men back to Port, where the rest of Jackson's army is, to see what's going on. So he takes Dick Taylor's brigade. It's some of those friendly Louisianan troops that everybody says that they were horrible to be around and that you couldn't trust them, or you could trust them to do the wrong thing. Never quite perhaps the right thing. So as Dick Ewell is setting his men up on the far ridge over there, he hears the artillery fire from Port Republic. He knows there's something wrong, and he thinks, maybe I should send some of my men over to Port Republic to maybe help out with the situation over there. And he does that. So he takes, if you look at the number of men the Confederates have, they estimate there's about 5,800 over here. There would have been about 600 more if he hadn't taken those men and sent them into Port Republic. So you got 5,800 men over there, and if you look on your map, you've got about 11,500 Union troops moving in this direction to the, and what they'll do is, Cruiser's two regiments will move here, but then Fremont will start to spread his troops out in that direction. So the first brigade that gets here is Milroy. Milroy will come up. He'll start to move out here, but as he moves out, and the rest of the Union troops start moving in that direction, Fremont starts to hear artillery, and actually infantry fire coming from over here. So the first actions that take place at Cross Keys take place here, and then you start to get cross artillery fire back and forth. But as you start to listen over here, you hear kind of a major engagement going on that side, and we're going to visit that location. But Fremont is sitting here saying, okay, I can hear artillery fire in the far distance. We just chased some Confederates out of here over there. He starts to realize that there's Confederate troops in the far bank, but now he's starting to get infantry fire from over here. Not here where his line is, but in that distance where that gap is between the trees, just beyond that. So it's a very confusing situation for him. Jim, do you want to?
Just remember that Ewell was not a part of Jackson's command until very, very recently. He had come kind of to operate independently on the other side of the Blue Ridge, and Jackson, through a little subterfuge, I guess might be the best way, conned Ewell to join and coerced him to join him. In the meantime, using the timing of orders from Lee for Ewell to come back, he came and said, I need him here. He's already here. He said, okay, he can stay. So Ewell is here not because Jackson wanted it or expected him to be here. It was based on, again, Jackson using, I won't say sleight of hand, but use things to his advantage to gain the addition of Ewell's division.
And as the Confederate Army moves out here, Jackson's, well, the Stonewall Brigade, they're out here. They move into town in Port Republic. Ewell is kind of, in the rear. And as he moves up, Ewell is the one to decide where the position is they're going to defend. And that's going to be in the ridge in the far distance over there. And your map, if you keep it dry, and you turn it upside down, Confederate line, and this is the Union line that's developing right here. Do you folks have any questions, or? Yes.
I'm new to these battlefield tours.
Yeah.
Where do you get the maps?
From my car, I'll give you one when I
Okay,
get back
okay,
here,
thank you. Okay, I'm sorry. I got
No,
that
that's
one.
okay. I'm glad you asked.
Yeah.
Is there any question? Because what's going to happen is there are going to be two brigades here that Fremont is going to order to attack the Confederates by moving straight across this field right here. And they're going to go out towards where the Confederates are. One thing that Fremont doesn't do is he doesn't send anyone out in advance to say what's the terrain like.
Okay.
If you go over this ridge and down the next, there's a creek out there called Mill Creek. It's been very wet, so it's kind of a moat. And as you go down this road and look to the right, you'll see especially as we get down the hill near to where the Port Republic Road is, you'll see this towering hill on the right-hand side, and that's the position that Dick Ewell has chosen to defend here. And for any troops that are moving in this direction, to go over that hill and then down into the valley, and then have to look up at that defensive position, it's rather formidable. It's almost a killing field. I know you're all getting wet, but any other questions? Because yes.
That tree line, is that Mill Creek Ridge?
It's actually just beyond it.
Okay, but so the Confederates were just beyond the tree line?
Yes, just beyond the tree line. Yes, in that direction. And Milroy will be over here, and Schenck will be here, and they'll be asked to attack directly out here. Milroy will actually take his assignment seriously, and Schenck will spend the next couple of hours kind of rearranging his men and never really getting them into the fight. But like I said, that's launched all the time that's going on. He's hearing noise from over here, and he has no idea what's going on over there.
Who's over there?
If you look at your map, you've got,
We can give it away.
what's that?
No.
Go ahead.
You've got Isaac Trimble.
He's up there.
He's the brigade commander over there, and there's a Demi Brigade, 2 regiments under Walker, and they're on the far side over there.
Okay.
And what they've done is they asked permission once to move slightly forward, and the next time they just didn't ask, they just moved forward.
Okay.
And then they're going to bump into a New York regiment over there, and that's the fighting they're going to hear.
Okay.
And then while that's going on, Fremont's going to have like second thoughts as to sending men out here when the fighting seems to be over there.
Okay.
So, any other questions other than I've got some maps in the car if you'd like them.
I gave him mine.
Okay.
I'll grab it back.
Okay. So, I think we're all right.
Yeah, I think we're
Okay.
on there.
So what we'd like to do then is to move from here. We're going to down to the end of this road. We're going to make a right-hand turn onto Port Republic Road. We'll go across the creek, and at the top of the next hill, we're going to make a right on Artillery Ridge. Okay?
If anybody wants a buddy